How are you doing? This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And what we're going to talk about today really quickly, does Bruce Beef prove reparations are needed? So we're going to get a little bit, investigate a little bit about this particular Bruce Beef story and kind of ask some questions around a particular story to try to ask yourself, based on what happened to the Bruce family, right? Or this particular family that was involved in this particular resort out in Manhattan Beach in California, does it create a justification or a rationale for why people need reparations inside the United States based on what happened to them in the past and people limiting their economic mobility and their economic ability? So really quickly, we're going to watch this video kind of based around this particular story and what one group did to try to help put these people in the position to try to repair some of this situation. And then we're going to kind of ask some questions about it based on some news articles around it, because I also have some questions based on the deal that the family took. So let's go really quickly. Let's get right into this video.
In 1912, Willa Bruce purchased land in the city of Manhattan Beach.
It was along this sandy stretch that two 33 by 100 square foot plots were once owned by Willa and Charles Bruce.
During that period of time in America, there was nowhere on the West Coast where African Americans could actually enjoy the water of the ocean. Over the years, a restaurant, a dance hall. So it was a very, very popular place for people to be. And it was very lucrative for the Bruce family, as it turns out.
Because of their popularity, they faced violence and threats, a lot of opposition to the growing Black community there in Manhattan Beach.
There were attacks by the Ku Klux Klan. A fire was set under the porch of the facility. There were attacks on the various patrons that came there. Fights on the beach. Tires were slashed. They put in 5-minute no parking signs. So you only had 5 minutes to park there, and then you would get a ticket.
This didn't happen in Mississippi or Alabama. This was here in Los Angeles County.
The Manhattan Beach City Council decided that they were going to use eminent domain to take the property from the Bruce family under the guise that they were going to put a park there.
But the land then sat vacant for several decades. At the time, there were very few places that Black families could go and enjoy the ocean, and its loss was devastating.
The Bruces took them to court, lost their entire fortune fighting to get their property back. They died destitute. This is a scar that's been on this family for 98 years. Their lives would have been totally different. They would have probably been multimillionaires by now.
You actually see the impact of that eminent domain action today in the city of Manhattan Beach. Black residents only make up 1% of the city. There's very little affordable housing. A group of moms came together in the wake of the Black Lives Matter uprisings in June 2020, and they learned about the history of Bruce's Beach. And one of the moms, Von Ward, decided to organize a Juneteenth action at the park to raise awareness about this history, which people had forgotten, even though it was in plain sight.
It's one of the most renowned beach communities on the West Coast, as Manhattan Beach offers 2 miles of sandy shores and multi-million-dollar homes.
Then someone said that Kavan should reach out to public counsel because we are one of the few civil rights organizations that has land use expertise here in Los Angeles.
Public counsel was invaluable to us. They were the first to believe that we could possibly pull this off.
When the family came to us, they were very clear about their goals. They wanted to get their land back, and they wanted restitution from the city of Manhattan Beach for economic losses that had happened.
Realtors told us that today, their plots would be worth about $20 million.
It was very clear we were going to need a range of skill sets in order to help the Bruce family. We turned to Kirkland & Ellis because that is a firm that always brings their resources to the table. The next step was in order to ensure that the property was rightfully returned and in a manner that could not be later challenged. And that's when we turned to George Fothery.
What was very powerful and fulfilling for me, especially as a Black lawyer, was this was an opportunity to really marry my personal values and commitments with the skills, training, experiences, not only that I've got, but to leverage the platform of my law firm.
There was this collective voicing that said, I don't care what else is on my plate. We must come to the aid of the Bruce family. We have to make this right. We have to get this property back to them.
The Bruce family was robbed of their land. They were robbed of their business. They were robbed of their legacy. But most importantly, they were robbed of their dignity.
Today, the county announced it plans to give it back.
The county isn't gifting anyone anything. The county is returning property that was inappropriately taken.
The day of the public ceremony where the county was officially returning the property to the family, I'll never forget the experience of being there and having the deed returned. This was a case with no precedent. And what I'm excited about, what I'm proud about, is now we've done it. Now people don't have the excuse of that's never been done before, we can't do it.
The Bruce story is not unique.
Okay, so let's go into this next video because I want to kind of look at this from a different angle. So here's another video about this same story that's a little bit shorter, but I think it gets a little bit deeper into what the family went through.
Barely developed, but on this small sliver of sand was a kind of paradise. For in rigidly paved Los Angeles, Black Californians were welcome on what was called Bruce's Beach.
There was 2 beaches in our area, this one and Santa Monica, Inkwell Beach.
Janice Hahn is a Los Angeles County supervisor.
African Americans were not even allowed to swim at the beach.
Here was lodging, a cafe, and a dance hall built by Charles and Willa Bruce. I own this land, and I'm going to keep it, Willa Bruce told the Los Angeles Times in 1912. Hated by their neighbors, harassed by the Ku Klux Klan, the Bruces refused to budge. So the local town council condemned the property through public domain, claiming it was needed for a park. The land sat vacant for decades.
I think anyone knows how hard it is to become dispossessed. That in itself is a grave puncture.
Derek Bruce is a great-grandson of Charles and Willa Bruce.
And so that's what our family has gone through, is a grave wounding.
Returning the property to the Bruce family became a rallying cry 2 summers ago as the nation reckoned with racism. Today, that act of reparation became official.
To rectify this historic injustice that was done to the Bruce family.
The Bruce descendants will lease the land back to the county for now. The county has offered to buy it back from them for $20 million.
Does this feel like justice to you? In a way it does. In a way it does feel like justice.
But Derek Bruce says the emphasis should not be on celebration, but on reconciliation.
And we have to understand that there is a path forward to human beings treating each other with respect and dignity.
Harry Smith, NBC News, Los Angeles.
Okay, so first question that we want to ask, right, that we want to kind of go into is, how do you think the land impacted the Bruce family, right? Because what I think a lot of people, when we look at these type of issues, we look at it as a binary issue. So one of the things that I've been made to understand that I have a really good, I would say a decent understanding of, is that capital and poverty, right, have a lineage. And what I mean by that is that when you have poverty that kind of moves throughout a family, what it does is each generation, it starts to, I don't know what the particular word is, but it starts to become cumulative. And one of the things that we've dealt with as people in our particular society is that many of us have never really figured out how to get out of poverty. And what happens is the poverty starts to accumulate through every generation. So we have Black people inside the United States, right? To where in 2023, no one in their family has never been out of poverty. Okay. Their family was slaves. Then they were in poverty once they got out of slavery, and then nobody has ever escaped that. And we still see in 2023, and I can tell by a lot of these, especially a lot of these YouTubers, that they're the first person in their family that has ever had any decent money. And it's really obvious by the way in which they conduct themselves and what they're willing to do to get money. And so that's why it's unusual that they look down on other people and what they do for money, but they're doing the exact same thing, because no one in the history of their family has ever really figured out how to be economically successful. And it's not just they haven't figured it out. For many people, the opportunity has been denied. And so when we're looking at poverty, but also we're looking at wealth, wealth is cumulative over a family. Do some people lose wealth over the course of generations? Yes. But many people can take the wealth from one person and continue to build off that over time, right? Especially based on what the wealth is built on, right? And so I think a lot of people don't understand that. They see in America, we're taught that poverty is this binary thing. Do you have individual decision making? Yes, you do. Do you have the ability to change your life in America? Yes, you do. But many times nobody wants to talk about poverty, but also wealth being cumulative over generations inside a family. So let me give an example. Elon Musk is in America doing what he's doing because of the work of the people that came before him and his family. He didn't just show up and start doing what he's doing. Okay. Zuckerberg is doing what he's doing in this particular country because of what his people did before him. Bezos is doing what he's doing because of what the people in his family did before him. Bezos went to his parents, got a $250,000 loan to start Amazon. Then he went to his network and got $50,000 from members of his network to start Amazon. Bezos did not start Amazon, right, with $5,000 and a dream and a hope. He was able to go to his network, right, and be able to get capitalized through his network and financial capital. And that's how he built Amazon. And he told them, give me money to where you won't mind if I lose the money. Okay. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. And so what we're doing is we're arguing with people about things that have been proven from an economic standpoint. So there's nothing to argue about. Wealth is cumulative and poverty also is cumulative. Doesn't mean you can't get out of it. But what I'm trying to get people to understand is that when a person is robbed of their ability to build wealth, that can create a negative impact across that family, right? Going for decades and generations, especially when they're using the power of the government to do it. Because what we see with this situation with Bruce Beach is that this was not done just by private citizens. This was government doing this. And this is why I think people don't really understand the reparations argument. Many of us was robbed of our ability to advance in this particular society because of government action, not because of what private citizens did. Okay. And many of us, if something happened with us because of a private citizen, we could not get recourse via government. And that's why I try to tell people when they say that we didn't need a civil rights movement, these people are idiots. They don't know what they're talking about. Because before the civil rights movement, a black person could not testify against a white person in court. So if you can't testify against a white person in court, you can't go to court and say, me and this white person and myself this white person broke a contract with me. So you don't have a right, you don't have the ability to enforce any contract with a white person, which means what? You can't do business with white people. So, right, you also couldn't serve on juries, right? So then what you've done is you've essentially exempted people out of this space that they need to build business, because the reason why you have government is to enforce contracts, right? You have the court system to enforce contracts. But when you have laws, right, some people call them Jim Crow laws, some people call them black codes, and they state that a black person cannot testify in court against a white person, then you can never do business with a white person. Now, where would a lot of y'all be if you could do business with white folks? You wouldn't have nothing in this world, right? But if you was in a world to where you could do business with white people, but then you couldn't say, hey, well, you know what? They violated the contract. I want to go to court and make sure I'm made whole, or I want to try to, get some type of retribution. And you couldn't do it because the courts wouldn't allow it. You would be living in a totally different world. And so you have to understand is that when government policy is against a certain group of people and they're using government policy to rob people of their ability to function as full citizens inside the United States, that's where we start to have an issue. Or when private citizens do it, and then we can't go to government because of our position in this particular society to get any kind of recourse in our end. And so that's what people really got to kind of understand. Okay, so Macamia, what I want to ask you to do, brother, is we're going to put you in time. I ask you to stay on topic. Okay, so what we're going to do is go into some really quick articles about this, because I have some questions about the way in which this rolled out. And I also have some questions about the numbers, right? And then we're going to ask some more questions. But that's what I want people to really kind of understand is that when we talk about Raleigh, North Carolina, we talk about Rosewood in Florida. Everybody wants to talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, which means they really haven't done a lot of study. But there's multiple places across this country where government acted to deny black people of their economic mobility. And what's really interesting is that, and this is why I say a lot of these quote unquote black conservatives, they're really good entertainers, and I'm not mad at them because they're keeping their white audience very dumb. But we need to build platforms to where we can have real, authentic conversations, because when you have multiple stories about black people obeying the law, engaging in the system, being economically mobile, doing what people says that we should be doing, and then the government comes and takes everything from you because people are really jealous that you're doing better than them. And you'll see this story amongst our people throughout history, is that when we come from slavery and we prove that even though we were slaves for 400 plus years, we were denied a lot of things, and then we can immediately go into this society, and then we can start to, it really, in a relatively short amount of time, become very successful. The backlash against that was a lot of violence, and a lot of people use the government policy to rob us. And that's the story that nobody wants to tell. And there is no other group that has had to deal with that inside this country, right? You don't have a government policy against African immigrants coming over here and building themselves up. That doesn't happen. They're able to come here and build themselves up. You don't have government policy against Asians or against other ethnic groups coming to America and build themselves up. They're able to do it relatively unopposed, right? We're the only group to where after 400 years of slavery, and then we said, okay, cool, y'all did what y'all did. We're going to just go live our life. And we're going to try to participate in the system as full citizens. They started creating a lot of policies against us, so we couldn't do that, right? So it's always interesting to me that these stories never get told, because they always got to find a fault in the person. Like I said, they're trying to appeal to their audience, and they're not bad people, and they're really a benefit to us because they keep their white audience very dumb. But what I don't buy into the back and forth is because it doesn't meet any kind of historical context, right? I can show you Ocala, Florida. I can show you Roseville, Florida. The brother that plays from he plays for the Ravens now, but he used to play for the Bears. His family's from an all-black town in Georgia. You have these stories over and over again where black people said, you know what? We're going to just do our own thing amongst ourselves, and we're going to work to build ourselves up, and we're going to obey all the laws, and people came to stop that because they couldn't accept that. How can a black person be doing better than me, but I've been socialized to believe that I'm better than them? So to make my reality match what my mind is telling me, I have to figure out a way to destroy what they got, because I can't accept that this person's doing better than me, but I've been programmed to believe that I'm better than this person. And I think that's what people really don't understand, right? Now, let's go into some articles, because like I said, I have a question about the numbers that were generated around this particular property, right? So here's from the New York Times. So the LA County is going to pay back $20 million from land seized from a black family, right? So we see right here, it was seized by officials in 1924. They're going to sell it back for nearly $20 million. So they condemned the property in 1924 and they paid them $14,500, so $14,500. They said they needed the land for a public park. However, they left it undeveloped for 3 decades and they lost the family to reclaim it. That land was later transferred to Los Angeles County and now hosts a training center for lifeguards, right? So Janice Hahn, who's on the Los LA County Board of Supervisors, they said that the owners decided to sell the property to the county for $20 million, a value that her office says was determined through some type of appraisal process, right? Now, a relative of the family, Dwayne Yellowfeather Shepherd, so I believe he's a native, said they only had no choice but to sell it, take whatever they could get, and use it to invest in some other way to develop the family wealth that they lost, right? So the property consists of 2 adjacent beachfront lots. Mr. Bruce purchased one of them in 1912 for $1,200, and the second one 8 years later for $10, right? The first lot measures by about 33 feet by 105 feet. Mr. Shepherd says that the 2 lots are identical, okay? Now, here's another article from Santa Monica Mirror, and this is what I want to kind of go into. So a grassroots campaign is called Where Is My Land? Shows that the Bruce property that he paid $1,200 for in 1912, they said that that land is estimated to be worth around $70 million, okay? So one of my questions is that how was it appraised for 20 when somebody else is appraising it or says that it's worth around 70, right? So does it mean the 70 is way off? Because that's the question, is that I heard, and I couldn't find the article, that the county would have paid them to use it yearly, right? Or you could sell it at one time. And then somebody told me, well, they probably couldn't pay the property taxes on it, which may have been the reason why they sold it. Or maybe just people just need the money. Because here's again, what we often find with people is that they hit these windfalls economically, but because they're doing so economically bad over the course of years, they have to take a cash payout. They can't take annuity type money, right? And so what we've seemed to have with this particular family is that because there's so many people involved in this and everybody's economic situation is different, they would rather take the $20 million, but it's not going to really be $20 million after taxes and after everybody gets it split up, as opposed to saying, well, let the county pay us yearly to use the land, but we maintain ownership of the land so we can get some of the value as the land continues to appreciate over time. And we find this often. That's why I want people to understand the Bruces in the early 1900s being robbed of their ability to use this land to its best use based on however they decided. Even though the man paid for it free and clear, he went through the system, he went through the process, right? We're now dealing with in 2023, the impact of that, right? And so I think that's the issue. And a lot of people, because they don't really understand, in my opinion, they don't understand economic systems, they don't understand, future cash flows and things of that nature. And they don't understand that poverty and wealth it's cumulative. It has a lineage. And you can often track where it started from, right? And so when you rob that from these people, they don't have now the ability to build it up. And they also went broke trying to fight it in court. You've now economically demolished this family and they got to start all over from square one, but it wasn't anything they did to themselves. It wasn't that he invested in the market and the market went south. This was done to him by government. And then you have the citizens or the residents of this area, they now benefit from this situation. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? And I think that's what a lot of people miss out on. So they benefit from the situation of taking the land from these people, but then their attitude is, well, we didn't do it, but you benefited from the land being taken from these people. Okay. And so I think that's what a lot of people are not really able to wrap their head around. So we talk about in 1912, 1920, they purchased those 2 plots of land. So the Bruce family moved from the West as part of the Great Migration from the South. They wanted to participate in the American dream. They turned it into a seaside resort, and they welcomed Black beach girls from all over Los Angeles and beyond, right? So we got to understand, even at this time in the country, you still had segregation. So you had legal segregation. So Black people had to have their own venues and had to have their own situations going on, right? So even though they left the South that was segregated, the West Coast was still segregated. So a lot of Black people, when they talk about moving to Los Angeles, especially Southern California, they talk about that Black people pretty much only lived in one part of the city, and you weren't allowed to go to other parts of the city, okay? So as a result, gained popularity and attracted Black beachgoers. Many white residents reacted with hostility and racism. So at the same time, other Black families purchased land lots nearby Bruce's Beach. Some built vacation homes, establishing the beginning of a modest and diverse community in Manhattan Beach, right? In 1924, prompted from a petition from local white real estate agents and other citizens, the Manhattan Beach City Council voted to condemn the Bruce Resort site and the surrounding land through eminent domain to build a park. It was well documented. The real reason behind the eminent domain process was racially motivated, with the intention of bringing in a successful Black business and to thwart other African Americans from settling or developing business in Manhattan Beach, right? At the time, the council voted to condemn the land. It also put new laws on the books that prohibited resort-type businesses in that area, prohibiting the Bruce and other Black families from purchasing any additional beachfront property for a resort. So in 1929, the court validated the city of Manhattan Beach claim through eminent domain and finalized a financial settlement. Then they demolished the resort. The Bruce family moved out of town, but despite all their claims, we know that they never built anything on that particular property until around 30 years later, right? So what we got to understand, and we're going to talk about again, when you are told that you can only build in a certain part of the city, and you build in that part of the city, and you start to do well, and then people don't like that, then they say, okay, well, you can't build here either, right? And then they look to take everything from you, but you're engaged in commerce, right? So I really want people to kind of ask themselves, what do they think they lose? Now, who benefited instead of the Bruce family? Because one of the narratives that you get for reparations is that, well, my family didn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't matter whether or not your family was the people that made the decision. The question is, did your family benefit? Okay. And so I think this is something that a lot of people don't really understand, because they often don't see how they benefit from situations. And what we want to ask ourselves is that, did the people of this particular area, did they benefit, or did they receive some type of benefit from that land being stolen through eminent domain from this particular family? And it was racially motivated because they were running a really successful Black business, and then it was attracting other Black people who had the ability to run other successful Black businesses. So really what Manhattan Beach said is, we don't want Black people in our area. And so once the Bruces put a footprint down and showed that they could be successful, then people started building ancillary businesses off of that. And Manhattan Beach just said, we don't want Black people in our area. Now, they're not talking about Black criminals, right? We're not talking about Black people that's living off the government. We're talking about Black people that are involved in business. They're involved in commerce, and they're successful at it. And I'm here to tell you, that's the real problem. So this is why I disagree with a lot of people, to where when we start talking about economic empowerment and us being economically strong, we find that that is more of a threat to people than us being dependent upon them. And I think a lot of people don't get that because they're not conditioned to see it that way. So when we start talking about economic empowerment, which is why, like I said, we can never have the economic conversation and having a level of economic strength, we find out that that is more threatening to people than us being dependent upon them. Because see, if somebody's dependent upon them, I can always throw that in their face, and I can also spoon feed them. When you are not economically strong, what I'm worried about is you are now going to start dictating terms to me because of your economic strength. So I don't want that, because we're dealing with a group of people that engage in economic warfare all the time. And that's what this was. This was economic warfare. But they don't want you to ever realize they engage in economic warfare. So they promote people to tell us that Our real problem is that we don't pull our pants up. Not that we don't know how to be economically competitive, because they're not economically competitive, because many of the people that are telling us that, they don't even run a real business. They've never met a payroll, right? They're not. So they're waiting to where they're like I said, they're like entertainers. If I say what somebody tells me to say and I'm compelling enough, they'll pay me some money. But asking these people, have they ever made a 2-week payroll? Right? And they'll be like, what are you talking about? Because they're just really entertainers. And so that's why, like I said, I don't argue with entertainers or people that are aspiring entertainers, right? About economic issues, because I know they don't know what they're talking about. Now, you can be a very, very successful entertainer, but no disrespect to Beyonce. She's a hell of an entertainer. Very, very successful. I would never put her on an economic think tank because that's not what she does. She's a very, very successful entertainer. And so that's what I think we're not understanding, is that the real threat in this system is when you start to become economically competitive, which is why the issue of us becoming economically competitive can never be an issue that we can put on the table, because that's when you really become a real threat. And it's showing with Bruce Beach. These were not black people that were criminal minded. These were not black people that came from the South and didn't have any skill sets and was living off the government. These were economically mobile black folks that was interested in doing commerce and having something for themselves and their family. And even when they tried to take the man's land, nobody rioted. Nobody went in the middle of the street and started protesting. He tried to go through the court system to get redress or to get a solution to it. So even when he realized these people are stacking the deck against me, he still followed the rules, right, that he was supposed to follow in this system. So you would think they would want that kind of person around them. No, they don't. Because what you got to understand is that this man is competitive with them. So their job as their group is to eliminate all competitors. So that's why they don't mind if you're around them if you're not competitive, because they can spoon feed you. Is when they think you might could take something from them is when they're going to start to have a real issue with you. And you see that same story throughout history with our people, especially post, right? Not say post, but, you know, what we call the Reconstruction area, where black people after slavery started trying to figure out how they was going to build a life for themselves in the United States. They didn't burn Rosewood to the ground because it was a bunch of bombs. Rosewood was a thriving community in Florida. That's why it got burnt to the ground. Same thing with black people living in Ocala, Florida. They didn't do that because it was a bunch of black people, who didn't have anything going for themselves, and they was asking white people for money every week, right? These were people that actually had something going for themselves, which made them a threat because now they were an economically competitive group, right? And so you don't see other groups having to deal with that, right? So tell me the story when some Africans come over here and they build a community and it works, and they got to worry about a white group coming and burning them out of everything. So what it does is it psychologically programs you that you're not supposed to be economically competitive, which is what we deal with today. So that's why we start talking about economic competition. Everybody just starts talking about everything else because they've essentially conditioned you that that's the one thing you can't talk about, right? You can't even bring that up. Okay, so let's keep going. So the next question is, so who's liable for what happened to the Bruce family? So we know who did it. The next question is who's liable. Okay. And so that's often what also, so you often get Anglo-Saxons will say, well, my family never owned any slaves, so then therefore I'm not liable. Right? And so that's their argument, is that, well, we don't believe in reparations because my family didn't own any slaves. So therefore we're not liable for the economic crime of slavery. But we want to ask is, did you benefit? So then the question is, if you're not liable, then who is liable? Right? So somebody has to be liable for it. So then the question we need to find out is who is liable. Right? So I can say I'm not liable, but it doesn't mean that somebody's not liable. So then who is responsible for what happened? So we can go after that person or those group of people. Right? So I'm not saying you're liable, but I'm saying somebody is liable. So our goal is to try to determine who's liable, because somebody is liable. And I think a lot of people don't want to really deal with that. They want to argue over who's not liable. I'm not saying you're liable, but I'm saying somebody is liable. And so we're going to identify the liable parties, and then we're going to go after those particular people. Right? Same thing to where you get in a car accident. The question is, who's responsible for the car accident? I may get in a car accident, but not be responsible for the accident, which means you can't sue my insurance company. But somebody's responsible for the accident. So that's who we going after. Right? And I think so. I'm not going to argue with people on the internet about who is liable and why they're not liable, because only 1% of people own slaves, which is also incorrect. Black people own slaves too, which is also incorrect, because if black people own so many slaves, where's the wealth at then? Because I understand how to do accounting, I can show you that we still have financial institutions and banks like Wachovia that still have financial capital as a result of chattel slavery. We still have insurance companies that have financial capital today because they insured slaves, right? So somebody is liable for this stuff. I'm not going to get caught into an argument over, well, my people aren't liable, and this lie about this black guy was a first slave on the United States, which is also false. But like I said, I'm not mad at those people, because I got to the revelation. I came to the revelation the other day that they're really a benefit to us, because they're making sure their white audience stays dumb. So they really a blessing to us. So I had to start kind of reframing how I look at these people, right? They're making sure their white audience stays dumb. They're just like a rapper that raps about nothing. That's what they're doing. They just talking about nothing all day. So if you listen to a rapper that talks about nothing all day, eventually you're going to get dumb, because you listen to the dumbness all day. So really, they really some of the best players on our team. We just got to learn how to leverage them the right way, right? So the question is, who is liable? Now, here's what I wanted to ask. Was the $20 million based on lost cash flows from the business, or just the value of the commercial property? Okay, that's really what I wanted to figure out, because the one group said that the property, the value was worth $70 million. My question was that, did they go in and try to figure out what were the lost cash flows? Because the man was running the business. It wasn't a scenario to where he just had a property there and he wasn't putting it to any use. This man was involved. Really, this was commercial real estate. And my question is, how did they determine the value of the 20 million? How did they come up with that number? So they said they did an appraisal. So did they do an appraisal on the land? And that's what I want people to understand. By them robbing their family of this business, they lost cash flows, because this was a cash flowing business when it got taken from them. And if you look at where this particular location is, right, out here on the beach. So this is Bruce's beach, right? Right. So you see they right by the beach. Okay. So they right by the beach. Now, I couldn't in a short amount of time look up commercial real estate value in that area. But if you just look at homes on Trulia in that area, right, this is a high income, high net worth area. Okay. This is the area around where Bruce's beach is at. Okay. This is, hold on one second. So this is the area around where they at. This is a high income, high net worth area right here. Okay. So this was in an area to where you got to have a lot of money to even be over here. And they robbed these people of building a business in this particular area. And they also robbed them of the cash flows that will come from this particular business. And that's the question I wanted to ask, is that how did they come up with that $20 million number? Was it just based on the value of the real estate property, or was it based on the cash flows? Because they took this business from them in 1924. And so that's what I try to tell people. Poverty has a lineage. It has it's cumulative over, and it creates health disparities, all kind of things, because this man went broke trying to stop these people from taking something from him, not because he did something wrong, just the fact that he was black and he was successful. See? So that's what people really got to understand. So do I think they sold too cheap? Yes, but what I said is they may need money. So if you have no money, you're flat broke. Any money sometimes looks like a lot of money, because I don't have any money. Capital has what I call staying power. What do I mean by that? If I already sitting on money and you say, well, David, we're going to offer you XYZ. Well, because I'm not desperate for it, I don't have to make a quick deal. I can say, no, I want that. Let's keep negotiating. Right? But when I'm desperate for money, I will often take the first deal on the table, because I just got to have something coming in, because I'm already doing bad. And we see this with a lot of our people. There's something that they do in the Southeast called heirs rights, that I think they took from Scotland. And they use that to take property from people, right? Using this thing called heirs rights. And it's really a paperwork game, and it's involved in the county. And they use it to steal a lot of land from black folk in the Southeast. Because what they do is they get one person to sell the land. When you got land owned by multiple people, they get one person to sell the land. Once they get one person to sell the land, they can get everybody else using what they call heirs rights. But that one person is doing bad. They don't have no money. So they offer that one person, like, here, let me give you $20,000 and I get your right to the land. And then by doing that, they create this chain effect to where they over time eventually remove everybody else from that land, because down south, because of land that people had, you'll have like 5 people or 10 people owning one piece of land. But out of those 5 or 10 people, 3 or 4 of them don't have nothing going for themselves. So they'll sell their land to somebody and they don't even know what they're doing. They thinking they just get $20,000 for their piece of the land, and don't realize that you essentially giving these people a way in to take all the land from your people. And this is something that they created in Scotland for the Brits to take land from the Scots, and then they just brought it over here. They just running the same game, right? So that's what I want people to understand, is that to me, there's cash flows that have been lost. And are we using that and we evaluating what's going on with this land? Because to me, $20 million for land in this part of California, that's real low. But I think they couldn't either pay the property taxes, right? Or they didn't have the knowledge and the understanding of what they needed to do next, right? Because the goal was just to get the land to them. But I don't want to just get the land to y'all. I want to where y'all can get the land and then y'all can start making money again, because y'all in the great part of California, you're in a high net worth area. So you can lease the land to somebody else and let them put a business there. Because why does the county still got to own the land? I thought it was your land. So this is what's weird. But like I said, is I don't think they have the right counsel in that area, because everybody wants to tell the story of them getting the land back. I don't want to just tell that story. I want to tell the story of y'all using that land to get back on your feet, because your grandfather was a very, or your great-great-grandfather, whoever, was a very smart, industrious person, because he understood the value on a beachfront property. Then he also understood the value of serving a particular market that wasn't going to get served by anybody else, right? That's what I want people to kind of understand. So now here's the next one, right? Why do you think the family sold for $20 million? We talked about this pretty much. I just think they needed the money. Because poverty is cumulative, I just think they needed the money. Because in 2023, we still have a lot of Black people that don't know what it's like to not be in poverty, or what it's not like to be right at poverty. So let's say the poverty level is, in your state, $25,000 a year for a family. They might be making 30, 35. They're right at that level. They're essentially a sickness away from being poor. And so any money looks like a lot of money, because it can help pay my right now bills, right? It can help pay my right now bills. And I think that's what people really got to start factoring in. Okay. What these people did was with stealing us and not allowing us to participate in this particular society fully, right? And participate in this economic society situation fully, is they essentially reinforced, right, poverty in our particular families, while giving other groups economic support through things like the Great Deal, the Homestead Act. We weren't given any of these things, right? And then, like I said, we have individual people. And like I said, I had a revelation. They the best players on my team, because they're going to keep their white audience dumb, right? So they really helping us. And so now that I look at it like that, we want to continue to let them say what they're saying, but we got to make sure our group has the right information and has the right perspective around these things, right? But when you don't allow people to participate in the economic system fully, while giving other groups of people economic support through the New Deal, right? Through Homestead Act, giving them land, right? You steal land from Native Americans, right? Using BLM. And then you give that land and allow Anglos to use it for farming and livestock and things of that nature. And they're able to build up off that land, right? You're giving these people an economic advantage in a society. And then when you do it all on your own with no help from the government, and the government comes in and tries to take it from you. And so that's what people really got to understand, right? And not everybody, because some people are never going to get it, but for us to understand it. So when somebody says, well, you know what? I don't believe in reparations because of 1, 2, 3, they just don't know what they're talking about, because you actually have the proper information. And this is not about individual acts by individual people. This is about government policy. And so the way you change it is you change the government policy. And if a person don't like it, they didn't have an issue with Black people being cut out of the New Deal, right? They didn't have no issue with that. They was all for that. So why you got an issue with it now, right? And so because your people weren't able to take the advantages of the New Deal and turn that into wealth, that don't have nothing to do with me. That's your family's issue, right? But so that's what you really got to kind of understand is that I think the family sold for 20 million because they need money. And maybe they couldn't wait for another 2-3 years to work this out through court to try to get a better deal from the county. So they just took what they could get. You know what I'm saying? But I'm not a fan of selling that back to the county. That's not the county's land. That's your family's land. Don't sell them people nothing. Me personally, I would have tried to find some people that can help me in that area. And man, I would have been eating pork and beans and living in my car till we get this thing together. But that's me. You know what I'm saying? I got an attitude problem about certain stuff. But I wouldn't have gave them people nothing. But I'm not by myself. So I got to think about other people because it's a family. It ain't just me. But if it was just me, I wouldn't have sold them nothing because I know I can get more than $20 million for that. In fact, I know the value is more than $20 million. So I'm not going to sell it to you for $20 million and walk away because it's not like a business. This is property. And that property would be worth more in 50 years than it is worth today. So my question is, what's going to be my legacy? Because if I don't know what to do with the money, all I'm going to do is consume it. Because to me, I would only take real estate money to go buy some more real estate. Right? And so they're taking real estate money to go do what? They're not going to go buy no more real estate because if they really understood real estate, they would never sell it. But like I said, I think they need the money. But now I'll be eating pork and beans and living in a car before I sold that. Right? Straight up. I'll go live with a family member and just work and pay that family member to have somewhere to live before I sold that. Because that's what capital does. Capital will try to starve you out till you take the deal they put on the table. So what I want to tell about anybody that's watching, right? If you disagree with the family receiving any payment because of the past, here is the StreamYard, right? But that's only for people that disagree. I'm not for people that agree with me. I want somebody that disagrees so I can get your analysis. So if you disagree, here's a StreamYard link. But I don't want people that agree, right? Because if me and you agree, we're going to just say the same thing to each other. If you disagree with the family receiving any type of payment, right, come on and talk about it. But other than that, we're going to go through this. We're going to go through the comments, man. We're going to get up on out of here. Erica, man, I really appreciate the $20. Erica, Classic Climb, smartphone money. Being productive, alerting, owning assets is more trouble than most folks think. Everybody want a low under the radar comes from white folks burning down towns, businesses. Erica, I 100% agree with you. And it's psychological. They did that to psychologically damage our people. And it's worked even now. It's worked over time. Right? And also, I have a theory is that by them killing certain people, most importantly, men, what you've done is you've killed a lot of the men who from I would say a bloodline, and I'm not trying to, down talk people, but I'm trying to simplify it. From a bloodline standpoint, had the will to actually be competitive. So once you kill and hang and lynch those people, you've kind of gotten those people out of the what I would call the pool of people. So what you get left with is a lot of people that's just real scary. And they just going to go along with whatever to go along. Because if you look at Rosewood, if you look at Ocala in Florida, it really involved killing a lot of black men. Because you had a bunch of black men that went downtown to Orlando to vote, to register to vote. And people in Ocala got so mad, they just killed them. And these was black men that had businesses. They was upwardly mobile. They had their own land. They was working, doing a positive thing. And they just got so mad that those dudes registered to vote. They killed them and they hung them in downtown Orlando. So to me, there's a psychological, but also a genetic plan to get these certain men out of society. So we get left with a bunch of people, they just going to argue on the internet and go back and forth, or they don't want to do nothing because they're really scared of these people. And I've been saying that for years. A lot of y'all is really scared of these people. Like really, y'all got fear and it's cool. I get it. But that is part of their plan. So that's a really great comment from Erica. And I appreciate the $20 super chat. Let's go through these comments. Terrence, man, I appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Right? So you says, Journey, I think about how eminent domain destroyed black communities. Most freeway highways go through historically black communities, most definitely. But what's interesting, Journey to Jasmine, is that many people now are moving back into these areas because of their proximity to mass transit. So especially like in Atlanta, they market communities now as having access to mass transit. Same thing with when I was living in Houston, they market a lot of communities of having access to mass transit. So it's just weird. But you're right. They cut through a lot of neighborhoods using these freeways, you know, and they made a lot of areas, one, to where you don't want to live there. Because one thing I noticed when I was living in Houston that I never noticed before is there's really nowhere you can go in the city where you can't hear the highway. And I wasn't used to that because I'm from Orlando, where you got like one highway, which is I-4. Now, I-4, which is interesting, it doesn't really cut through any Black community. It doesn't really cut through anywhere because it don't really take you anywhere. Atlanta, I never really lived in that part. So like I just came earlier from College Park. Where I was at in College Park, we're by the highway, but you can't hear it. But for some reason, when I was in Houston, it doesn't matter where you at, you can hear the highway. I don't know what it is about. I think it's the material that they use to build the road, and it's very loud. But that's a great comment. So Todd says Bruce Fenley should help Erica Williams. Most definitely should hit Erica up. Pay her for a console. Pay her $20,000 for a console, and she could give him a lot of ideas of what they could have done with that land, especially where they located at. They right by the beach. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, hit her with a $20K, and she'll give you some ideas of what you could have did with the land. But that's for anybody, not just them. So annuity is a cash flow and asset, just like having rentals, definitely. Katrina says you can change the rules if you control the purse strings, definitely. So GC says he played all the rules and got done dirty. Yeah, that happened to a lot of people. There's a long story of that happening. So GC says, no telling how far he could have expanded along with the other families if he was allowed to conduct business. Most definitely. He was doing his thing out there. Todd says these heirs' properties are being used against Gullah Geechee. Yeah, they are. Because that's where my family from. Yes, they are. Most definitely. But it's because people don't have no money. Right? So that's one of the biggest issues. Because some Gullah Geechee have the land, but some don't. Because you find Geechee people all up and down the Southeast. Right? And a lot of people don't even know that their name is on something. But there's somebody reach out to them and be like, hey, your name is on this. We'll give you $10,000, $15,000 for your piece in it. And don't realize by you doing that, you're going to not allow them to use that heirs' rights to get their family up out their property. They don't even know. Because a lot of people don't even know that their name is on something, some property. They're not even aware of that because they're not making any money off of it. So they don't know. So that's real. Because my people are from an island right off the coast of South Carolina. And it's pretty much just all Black people living there. So JLD says, my family farm is in North Carolina. There was no will, so all the children have a plot. I know my siblings will sell as soon as my father dies. Yeah, that happens. But, if people need money, they need money. My question is, why don't we try to sell it to each other? You see what I'm saying? But then somebody else may offer more, and then the issue is we'll sell it to that person. My thing is let's sell it to each other and keep it in the family because then we can form a trust. But if somebody say, hey, if I tell you, hey, I'll sell it to you for $10,000, somebody else say I'll sell it to you for 20, they sell it for 20 because what you don't know is that he going to use that 20 to take everything from everybody using this particular, structure, this particular legal structure they got set up through the courts. Yeah, GI Bill, education and home loans, most definitely. So JLD, I appreciate the $5 super chat. So he says that's how Overtown got messed up in Miami. They put a highway right on top of Black businesses, flood city with drugs. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's real. But see, the issue is it legit. They're now moving back into that area because Miami's going to flood. Miami Beach is going to flood. It's going to be underwater. So now what you're seeing is that we're moving back into that area. So what I want us to understand is that real estate that when we was coming up wasn't considered valuable is not very valuable because if you go look at the little Haiti area in Miami, that's one of the few areas of Miami that's above sea level. So you got a whole city that was built essentially under sea level. Miami has a massive flooding problem. And Miami, it'll be underwater in 50 to 100 years. Now, it seems like a long time. We probably won't be here, but somebody will be here. And if you actually go to the Army Corps of Engineers, they'll tell you that Miami is going to be underwater the next 50 to 100 years. So what they're doing now is all the money's moving off the coast. I would never buy a condo in Miami in the coast unless I got it way up. And then you have the same problem with the one that just failed, where if they're not doing inspections properly, it's going to collapse on itself, which is very unfortunate to happen to those people, because you in a condo going to sleep at night and the whole condo fall down on top of you because they're not doing inspections properly, and the water damage is destroying the condo. So the land that historically in Miami nobody wanted to live on because it was on the other side of the bridge, that's now the most valuable land, right? But it takes staying power. It takes the ability to buy that land and maybe sit on it for 10, 15, 20 years. But they're coming that way because why? They're not going to be able to live on the beach that much longer. And that's why I say, because we haven't made this stuff important, we necessarily won't see the trends in the economic situation and the real estate situation changing. So then when it changes over, we still left out, right? Because I'm telling you, Miami currently has a massive flooding problem. The problem's not going to get any better, right? There's too many people living there, and they're just building everywhere. And I know, because I'm from Florida, pretty much everything south of Alligator Alley is swamp, except that little strip on the east side, right? So what they did was they drained swampland and they drained bogs to build property. Mother Nature gonna take that stuff right back eventually, right? It's all swamp, it's all bog. So they're looking now for land that's above sea level because of the flooding issue. Now the mayor says he got a solution to it. There is no solution to it, and the Army Corps of Engineers say they're not gonna come in and try to save it, right? They're not gonna do that. So it's just gonna eventually have issues with flooding, because Miami has a real flooding issue. It rains real hard in Miami, the whole city floods. Everybody knows that. And it's been doing that forever, right? Orlando don't flood like that because Orlando's on higher ground. But when it rains real hard in Miami, the whole city floods. All the downtown floods. Why? Because it's pretty much either at or below sea level, right? So that's the issue that they have. So that land across the bridge is very valuable down there in Homestead. All that's valuable land, but you got to get on it now. So here's some game. I was watching Erica and Andy buys homes. And he was talking about Sarasota and how those lots have appreciated. I remember when nobody didn't want to live in Sarasota. But now, because the situation, the demographic situation has changed, people are now moving to Sarasota. Sarasota used to be a 2-horse town. Nobody want to live out there. So those lots was relatively inexpensive. Now they're 30, 40, 50,000. Once you put a home on, it's going to even jump up more. Everybody's trying to move to Sarasota. The next space they talked about, I've been talking about this for years, is going to be St. Pete. Pretty much anywhere you at in St. Pete, maybe 25, 30 minutes away from the beach, right? But St. Pete historically was low, especially South St. Pete was low income and black. So nobody didn't want to live there. That's when people should have been accumulating. So St. Pete going to blow up and it's going to turn like that. And then people going to get put out of their house, or they're going to sell their house, and then St. Pete going to be the place to be. So that's what I'm saying, is that I'm not tripping on no AP Black Studies course, because that's just political theater anyway. What's real is these economic trends and trying to get a foothold and trying to put myself in position, because that's what's going to stand the test of time, right? So that's why I'm not tripping on a lot of this stuff that people trying to bring to me and be like, you got to trip on this stuff. I'm not really tripping on that, right? Because it ain't going to mean nothing in 2 years anyway. But no disrespect to people that talk about that, but I'm not tripping on that, right? I know Florida. Dana, the real Dana, go follow her channel. She do a lot of really good work, especially with Judge Joe Brown. And every once in a while, I shoot on there like once a week. We do like a little recorded segment. Go check her out, Dana. I appreciate the $10 super sticker. That's at the real Dana. It says they could have fundraised. I mean, they could have. But Mr. Bowen, this story been going on a minute. They probably could have used your expertise in this situation. But fundraise from who? So it says, you're right, Miami Garden, Carol City. Yeah, but they call it Miami Gardens now. Now it's Carol City. I'm sorry. They call it, they call it Miami Gardens now. It used to be Carroll City, right? It used to be Carroll City. Now they rebranded as Miami Gardens. You know what I'm saying? And nobody used to want to live there. Now everybody's over there. Everybody's over there now. It's still dangerous though. So instead of developers of purchase land in Little Haiti have to contribute to a fund that was set up by the Haitian community, they'll do that. It don't matter if they own it at the end of the day. But there was a time when nobody wanted to live in Little Haiti, right? Now it's very valuable land. So really the time they'll be accumulating in Little Haiti was the 90s when nobody wanted to be over there. Everybody was scared to be over there. That was a time to be accumulating over there. You don't have to live over there. Just accumulate. Let somebody else live over there. Let them take them chances. But as it turns over, because you got to understand, and I'm not talking about you personally, the way Florida was built is not sustainable. There's too many people there. They're going to find out the hard way. So as the issue with Miami with the water issue becomes worse and worse, more and more people are going to start moving inland, right? Because it's really not sustainable the way they built it out. They had a good 50, 60, 70-year run, but it's just not sustainable. Everybody want to live on the beach. Everybody can't live on the beach. Not in South Florida. You can't. You could try that maybe in North Florida, Central Florida. Yeah, St. Pete is a real nice area. It just is. Because like I say, you're 35 minutes away from the beach. Because when I lived in Tampa, I would go to the beach in St. Pete. And I lived in Tampa, and I was maybe a 30-minute drive. Right? It's just a beautiful, but nobody really wanted to live there, so it wasn't really well developed. When you would be in St. Pete, it would seem like it was like in 1985. And I was in school in like 09. Because there wasn't a lot of development there. Now there's a lot of development dollars going into that area, but it's like you on vacation all the time, right? And so I just think people don't kind of understand how these areas change, and also Central Florida, but most definitely St. Pete. So all those black people that's living in South St. Pete, they gone, they out of there. And they've been living down there for years, but they out of there. Also, there's a college in South St. Pete that does marine biology. So you see a lot of people talking about moving to other states because Miami's filled with Hispanic. Well, Miami been filled with Hispanic people, and the price been high. That's 1980s, right? Latinos started moving there like really in the 50s and the 60s, right after the Cuban Revolution. And price has been high in Miami. Miami to me has never been a cheap city. It might have been before I was born, but I don't remember any time it being real cheap. It's always been like a go-to place, and it's on the beach. So I appreciate everybody for coming through. Hope you got some value from it. But what we want to kind of talk about is this Bruce B situation, and to just give you a basic understanding so that when you are talking to people about reparations, you don't get emotionally triggered. You don't allow people to hot button you. You don't allow people to, just use non sequiturs and use red herring arguments. Like I said, a lot of these people that are miseducating through entertainment, they're really working for us because they're making sure their audience stays dumb, which means they're not going to be competitive with us. And so what we had to just do really is focus on what's important, what we're trying to get out of the situation, and just keep moving forward. But this Bruce Beach story, you can find this story all over the country that has happened to multiple black families. They just haven't been made whole yet. And what I want to really encourage people to do is when it comes to these type of situations, I understand people are in economic distress. I understand people need money, but I want to encourage people to make sure that they get their value out of the situation. And it's easy for me to say it if you need money, right? So if you need money, you need money. I get it. But I want to just encourage people to make sure that they get their value out of the situation, because the name of the game now is, to me, to get people to sell themselves cheap so people can wipe their hands of situations and so we can keep pushing forward. Hope you got some value from it. David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. I'll talk to you later.